Folks, as it involves conference realignment and expansion, just forget everything that you've ever thought of regarding previous affiliations, past history, traditions, even geography, logic, out the door. Just forget it. Get the lawyers involved, know what they have to say about it, and follow the money, basically, and determine who's got the power. And you may have a chance to figure out how this is all going to land, but I really don't. Got Kevin Noon on the line from Buckeye Grove on Rivals. Tony Gerdeman at the top there from Buckeye Scoop. Guys, we appreciate you jumping on for a little special edition here and a brief rundown of exactly what's going on right now involving the Buckeyes in particular. So, Kevin, I think you've got a little less time. Let's start with you in regards to what could possibly be a thread of truth in regards to all these rumors. We've got a Big Ten, Pac-12 possible, not necessarily a merger, but an agreement and affiliation. We've got the Big Ten possibly raiding the Pac-12. We've got USC coming into the Big Ten. We've got all sorts of rumors out there involving Ohio State and the Big Ten. Yeah, and truthfully, any rumor I hear right now has a shred of plausibility, more or less, to it, because we don't know what we don't know. And if you would have told me 6 months ago that the Big Ten could become a national league, reaching out to the West Coast, getting USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, or what have you, I would have told you, no way. I'm not willing to sell on that anymore. I'm not willing to sell on the thoughts of there becoming super conferences. I'm not willing to sell on the thoughts of the Big Ten trying to find a way to have a partnership with the ACC, which is going to be more complicated because their grant of rights goes through the mid-2030s. Honestly, I think of all the rumors out there, the one that I have the hardest time believing is that the Big Ten would be satisfied with the additions of Kansas and Iowa State and call it a day, and look at the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma and saying, well, we'll see you and we'll raise you the Cyclones and the Jayhawks. I'm not sure that Then again, we also have a league that prematurely canceled football, only not to revisit it, only to bring it back. So then again, I'm not willing to sell on anything. Yeah, unless you can sign Matt Campbell to a lifetime contract that's irrevocable. Would there be only a slim chance that you're keeping up with those two additions to the SEC? Tony, in regards to anybody having a chance of, as Kevin started to take us down the path of understanding not just the possibilities, but what the restrictions are across the leagues, what do we have to keep in mind in regards to partnerships and deals and money and agreements there?
Yeah, and there's a lot there because, as Kevin said, the ACC grant of rights runs from 2035 to 2036, and there's no getting out of that. So you can't really add an ACC team at this point. The SEC grant of rights is 2033 through 2034. Pac-12 is 2023 to 2024, which is where it gets interesting, and maybe there is something there. The Big 12 is 2024 to 2025, as we know. Oklahoma and Texas have both said they'll honor those grant of rights, but they'll continue to survey the college football landscape, which means they're not going to honor the grant of rights if they can find a cheaper way out of it. But there's big money involved in leaving these conferences, big money involved in adding. And the only splash that is out there possible for the Big Ten is the Pac-12, because there's nothing available in the ACC, nothing available in the SEC. Iowa would put their foot down on Iowa State. They don't want Iowa State in the Big Ten, I'm going to assume. Like, nobody, like Texas A&M doesn't want Texas in the SEC. So there's the Big 12 possibilities are just, they're too little, too late, or not enough, too late. It's it would be a sad trombone type of noise after the blustery fanfare of adding Texas and Oklahoma. So I think the Pac-12 is what you maybe look for. And is it some sort of an agreement with conferences, ACC agreement type of thing, or is Notre Dame still part of that mix? And do you do some interconference stuff there? So there's still some options, but none of it is as, I think, impressive as adding OU and Texas to the SEC. And I did ask Gene Smith at Big Ten Media Days about the Big Ten expanding west, and he said it's not something they've talked about, or it's not something he's thought about, which may or not be true, but he did say that's a long way to travel for athletics.
Legends, leaders, travelers. I don't know what we can do with
Exactly.
divisions there.
Travelers, that horse at USC, its name is Traveler. I mean, it's just all fitting together. But I'll throw this out there, and I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one here on TV. But about the ACC, what would happen if the ACC were rated to a point that there was no longer a quorum left there? If the ACC were cannibalized, who would be there to enforce any sort of grant of rights? And that might be more of a case of what happens if we go towards super conferences or things of that note. But I really think that the four-letter network also is going to be heavily involved in trying to protect the ACC, because it, wholly owns the ACC network and obviously paid out a lot of money to make that happen. So, yeah, I agree with Tony in saying that the ACC might be a bit of a pipe dream. But I know a couple years ago when people were rattling the saber of going out and trying to get UVA and Georgia Tech and UNC or whatnot, it came down to maybe the SEC and the Big Ten could raid the ACC to a point that there were not enough members there. Good luck, NC State and Wake Forest, trying to go and collect this money, because we'll see you in court. But again, I don't know necessarily how that works. There are people far smarter than me out there, and just period, and probably on the street that I'm parked on, that have a better idea of how that works. But just something that we talked about a couple of years ago.
Well, and we're going to be recording a podcast sort of about this subject today. So I was, for once in my life, doing some research for the podcast, and going back to Maryland leaving the ACC. It was a $52 million buyout, but they negotiated it down, sued it down to like $30 million. And from what I found, after that, the ACC stopped allowing buyouts, and it was just, we're going to just go to the grant of rights, which is kind of a poison pill for everybody. Like, nobody can leave. Now, as Mark and I talked about before the show, lawyers can do wonderful things, also terrible things. But if they get involved, maybe they can change some things there. I wonder if, Kevin, you know this, Mark, I'm sure you know this from dealing with Buckeye fans. Buckeye fans some of them would like to see Ohio State leave the Big Ten.
Right.
And the grant of rights ends in 2022, 2023 for the Big Ten. And so is this an opportunity for Ohio State and Michigan or Penn State and Michigan State to, I don't know, move to the ACC or something like that?
And I certainly, we all have message boards. We all read them. Sometimes it's our job. Sometimes it's fun. I've had fun reading some of these realignment expansion conversations. I've read a rumor from, Joe 123. I mean, name changed because I don't remember who it was, saying, what about Ohio State going to the SEC to replace Vanderbilt or whatnot? I've certainly have seen the report out there. And again, I use that term loosely. It's from just some rando behind an anonymous name saying that the SEC is just going to do this and put it together and is going to reach out to Ohio State and Michigan and Clemson and Florida State and whatnot and just try to end it, checkmate and finish it and put it together. I mean, I've said for years and years and years that we are going to get to a point of where we're going to see a fracture in Division I FBS, and we're going to see a top set of teams break away. Could the SEC be the ones putting this together at this point? And in doing so, talk about, being lucky as potentially a Vanderbilt or, I've already ripped on them, so I'll rip on them and nobody else. But some of these other teams that are going to just be carpetbaggers getting into the inner circle just because they were there first and the luxury condominiums were built around them. Because, there certainly are some teams in the SEC that are not competitive in football, not competitive in basketball, and just kind of, they bring up maybe the baseball prestige of the league.
So if the SEC does this, where's the competition? Because to thrive, you need competition. Or is this a national league that swallows everything that's relevant into play a 32-team football league or whatever?
Well, and because of the difficulty of competition, I sit back and think, until they expand the playoffs, is this good for Ohio State? You could have the SEC picking each other off. Alabama has 2 losses. Are they going to make the playoffs with that? And their schedule gets difficult. Ohio State's schedule remains the same. The concern at that point then I think also becomes the SEC is clearly the best place to play college football. And so that's going to impact Ohio State recruiting. That's going to impact everybody else's recruiting. We've seen how it's impacted California recruiting with the Pac-12 not being involved really in the playoffs. And you got Pac-12 California kids going all the way, from Arizona to Texas to Florida. And so they're not staying home. And so if you're in a footprint or a conference that isn't the SEC, it's a concern. And we talked to Ryan Day this week, and he said, he loves to know what's next. As a coach, he likes to be regimented, and he has no idea what the next 5 years are going to look like for college football.
If the Big Ten's looking to keep up, and the league has been conservative by nature throughout its history, but it's time not to be conservative. And Cincinnati is right there. Now, Cincinnati's, much like an Iowa State, is a hot commodity right now, but not necessarily a proven commodity over time. And then if geography be damned, why not leap the ACC and the SEC, go down to UCF in Orlando? That school and that football program has a ton of pluses inherent to location and the alumni base and the enrollment.
They do, but so much of conference expansion, the most visible part, the part that we all talk about, are athletics. I mean, and generally in talking about that, that's talking about football. But are you bringing in enough to warrant handing out a share or multiple shares if you're adding multiple teams to bring it in? Do you up your prestige? Do you up your media rights package enough bringing in Cincinnati? You don't. Or UCF? You don't. Plus 2, are they just Johnny-come-latelys? Are they just going to be a situation of, certainly if you bring UC in over Ohio State's dead body, I can guarantee you on that. But if you bring UC in, I don't know necessarily what. UC's got plenty to gain. It's going to have the position of saying we're a Big Ten school now. We can do this, and this. But are you going to be able to hand them $70 million a year in terms of the broadcasting rights for Tier 1 sports? And the answer is no. And and UCF is a little bit different. That does open up Orlando. There's certainly some things there. It would maybe open up maybe a little bit more recruiting for some of your second and third tier Big Ten teams, just because of the potential of playing every other year down in Orlando. But I don't like the idea of that any more than I like the idea of Iowa State or Kansas or Oklahoma State or whoever from the Big 12 that people are trying to throw at the Big 10 right now and trying to act like it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, and I've said UCF as well in the past because they are a gigantic school in Florida. Neither UCF or Cincinnati are AAU schools. We'll see what kind of hang up that continues to be. Nebraska is working back towards being an AAU school to complete that circle for the Big Ten. But if it has to be AAU schools, that cuts your prospects down even more. And, so there's at some point you either, I don't know, do you lessen your standards academically? Or do you hold firm and come to some agreement with some, with the Pac-12 or something like that, where they have some AAU schools and there's some relationships there? You think all of these people in charge now kind of grew up in the era where the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and the Big 10 were, like cousins, and they played every year, played at the end of the year, they played sometimes at the beginning of the year, and maybe they want to get back to that, but it's going to be interesting to watch all of the moving parts because it's going to be something new every month.
So, yeah, and I want to jump in with that too. Talk about landing in a windfall if you're not an AAU school and you get in and you're allowed into the BTAA, which was formerly the CIC, which is just this gigantic research and grant arm that is close to $10 billion or whatnot. Again, that's why I say we see the athletic side of this, especially football, but there's so much more of a fit when it comes to these types of situations. I mean, and you look at the BTAA and you look at University of Chicago. I mean, you sit there and you look at like affiliate members in terms of the Big Ten, in terms of you do have like Johns Hopkins and lacrosse, you do have Notre Dame in hockey or whatnot. I mean, they certainly still seem to have this view of how it needs to be. So I agree 100% with Tony about the AAU thing. I mean, they're going to be the detractors out there saying that, well, that's, certainly something that kind of screwed up a deal because, correct me if I'm wrong, is Oklahoma AAU, Tony? No. And I think that, there's a belief that if they wanted to go together, that kind of screwed things up. We don't know. We don't know what's happening in these high level meetings for certain on all of that. But, I think that the Big Ten is going to have to evolve a little bit in its thinking. That doesn't mean that it's going to be able to bring in, some, broadcasting college of clown and makeup arts. I mean, you can't sit there and just water down your product just to think that you're going to be bettering your football product. But I think that this belief that it's only going to be AAU schools, I think they really need to revisit it. And let's remember, Nebraska was AAU before, when it enrolled or when it moved to the Big Ten. And then I believe that the reason it's not had something to do with because the medical school is at UNO and not UNL and some other things. And yeah, I do think Nebraska's close to getting back to whatever benchmarks are there for admittance.
So the Big Ten and the Pac-12, you guys have both alluded to a partnership, or certainly what the relationship has been throughout the years. So short of a merger, which would obviously, you're talking about 26 teams, so others would be left by the wayside, or it would be a football only thing where maybe the Big Ten's plucking some. I can't imagine it's an all sports thing, and we're going to have USC traveling cross country to Rutgers to play lacrosse and women's soccer, but on a regular basis. So what is this going to look like? How do you see this partnership looking to benefit them in football against the SEC? Because that would be the reason for doing it. What would they do? What would this partnership look like?
Kevin,
I would say you have to go pods. I mean, you would have to go pods, and I would think that you would have like a Northwest and a Southwest, and then an East-West or something like that, and you play everybody in your pod. You play X amount against, your sister pod, kind of maintaining the Pac-12 North and South and the Big Ten East and West. And you probably have a couple of guaranteed crossover games to where you're going crisscross. I mean, you already have Ohio State playing Oregon. You already have Michigan playing Washington. Several years ago, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 had this scheduling alliance that never came to pass. So, there certainly has been conversation about it before, but if we're talking about this as a football only thing, I think you do something there. I think if you talk about it as an all sports thing, I think it's going to be a situation of where you play your conference or something. And I use that in an NFL thing, your AFC and your NFC, you have your PFC and your BTFC, and you play within your conference mostly, maybe have a couple of crossover situations, and then you really kind of deem your champions in a championship type of setting or whatever. I don't know. I'm not going to say this is the first moment I've thought of this, but I haven't given that one a ton of thought because I tend to think that the Big Ten would more likely go and just try and poach a couple of teams. And, I don't think anybody wants Arizona State right now at this point in terms of football, as they're probably going to get whacked pretty hard by the NC2A. Wazoo isn't offering a lot. I mean, there certainly are some schools out there that don't add much to the athletic profile. But then again, if the Big Ten loves it, some academics, adding Cal Berkeley and Stanford, I mean, I can see the brain trust there sitting there just rubbing their temples with anticipation over the thoughts of doing that. Talk about, the BTAA having close to $10 billion. You add those big boys in there. Woo boy.
Yeah. So one final thought here, unless you guys have anything else, would be going back to kind of the origin of all this. The Big 12's done. My initial thought was if they could act quickly enough to add some combination of Boise State, SMU, Memphis, UCF on down the line, all those teams that have been talked about. And they certainly don't make up for the brand name and the power and the money of Oklahoma, Texas, but in terms of quantity, they make up for it, maybe even add to it, that they've got a chance for survival. But it's almost what happens first. Do they add and get to 10 or 12 quick enough that they can maintain what they've got and have a fighting chance to argue, to have an argument with those schools being poached by others? Or if they obviously get cut down to 5 or 6 here in the next couple of weeks, then they're done. It dissolves. Nobody's going to want to jump on board.
I think the Big 12 was always going to be the team, the conference left out, going back to the previous round of realignment when everybody was talking super conferences, because they're in the middle of nowhere and they don't have as much to add. And so I don't think, I've said in the past UC would be a good spot for the Big 12, but if the Big 12 is going away, there's nothing there. And you're going to run into some schools who used to compete for national titles, and now are they going to be left behind when the autonomous 5, which becomes maybe the autonomous 4, create these super conferences? Are a lot of these big schools going to be left behind? And so there's so much scrambling right now, and maybe they have to take lesser deals to become part of the Big Ten or something like that. And so I don't know where these guys are going to land, but you feel like they can't all make it. So there's going to be some people left out of the boat.
Right. Let's remember the Big 12 is just a relatively new creation of the pieces of the Big 8 and the old Southwest Conference or whatnot. I mean, we're not dealing with a conference. Wow, getting weird audio there. That's getting, that's been long for the landscape. So, it just makes sense that the Big 12 is going to be the one. We thought that maybe under Larry Scott that the Pac-12 might be the one to win the sprint to a relevancy. But I think right now with what Texas and Oklahoma are doing in their move toward the SEC, I think the Big 12 is on borrowed time right now, whether or not they realize it or not. And I think that there are plenty of people there that realize it, as every day we see a new rumor about a Big 12 school allegedly talking to the Big 10, only to be later debunked.
Yeah, I would say that a number of people have approached it in conversations with me and comments to my channel that with the assumption that once you're a big boy and play big boy football, that you've got a lifetime guarantee, and that's not the case. Look at Houston, look at SMU, once members of the Southwest Conference, which was a major conference, and now they're left out. That could be the fate of Baylor, TCU, and others. All right, guys, we appreciate it. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove, rivals to your right there. Tony Gerdeman right in the middle from Buckeye Scoop. These guys do an amazing job, and I appreciate them coming on board, trying to make some sense of it all, which is impossible at this point. But, guys, we appreciate it. We will see you soon, sometime this week, most likely on Wednesday for our Buckeye show.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.